Elizabeth Taylor did something that nearly ended her career. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't a scandal. It was a photograph. One picture that leaked to the press and created such a firestorm that Elizabeth's publicist told her it was over. She'd never work in Hollywood again. But when Elizabeth saw that photo, she said something nobody expected. "I'd do it again. Some things matter more than fame." What was in that photograph, and why did it almost destroy Elizabeth Taylor? This is that story. October 12, 1970. Elizabeth Taylor was in her dressing room at MGM Studios in Culver City, California, getting ready for a publicity photo shoot for her upcoming film. Hair and makeup artists working on her face. Wardrobe assistants adjusting an expensive designer gown worth over $10,000. Elizabeth was 40 years old, still beautiful, still one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, still commanding $1 million per film, which was an enormous sum in 1970. Her publicist, Chen Sam, knocked on the dressing room door. Elizabeth could hear the urgency in the knock. 3 sharp raps. Fast. Insistent. "Come in," Elizabeth called out. Chen walked in holding a newspaper. His face was pale. His hands were shaking slightly. In 20 years of working with Elizabeth, through scandals and divorces and international incidents, Elizabeth had never seen Chen look this worried. "What's wrong?" Elizabeth asked. She was sitting in front of a large mirror surrounded by lights. The makeup artist stepped back, sensing something serious was happening. Chen held up the newspaper. Front page. Above the fold, a large photograph taking up half the page. Elizabeth looked at it, felt her stomach drop. Her hands went cold. The photograph showed Elizabeth Taylor in a hospital bed. Her dark hair was messy and unwashed, falling across the pillow in tangles. No makeup. Her face looked exhausted, drawn, older than 40. She was wearing a plain hospital gown that had slipped off one shoulder. There were 4 tubes visible in her arms. Medical equipment in the background. She looked sick, vulnerable, weak, human, not glamorous, not beautiful, not the Elizabeth Taylor that appeared on movie screens and magazine covers worldwide. Just a woman. A tired, sick-looking woman in a hospital bed. The headline above the photo read, "Elizabeth Taylor's secret hospital stay, career in jeopardy." Below that, in smaller text, "Exclusive photos show actress gravely ill, studios panic over insurance liability." Elizabeth stared at the photo for a long moment. Her hands were still cold, but not from fear, from something else. Something complicated. "How did they get this?" she finally asked. Her voice was quiet. Chen Sam put the newspaper down on the counter in front of Elizabeth. "We don't know. Someone at the hospital, we assume. A nurse or an orderly or a visitor. They took the photo and sold it to the tabloids. For a lot of money, I'd guess. It's everywhere, Elizabeth. Every newspaper. Every magazine. The wire services picked it up. It's international news now. Elizabeth Taylor secretly hospitalized. Elizabeth Taylor gravely ill. Elizabeth Taylor's career in crisis." The makeup artist and wardrobe assistants had quietly left the room. It was just Elizabeth and Chen now. Chen pulled up a chair and sat down next to Elizabeth. "We need to do damage control. Immediately. I've already gotten calls from 3 studios. They're panicking. They want to know if you're too sick to complete your current film. They want medical reports. They want guarantees." Elizabeth was still looking at the photograph. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd get back to them." "But Elizabeth, we need a statement. We need to explain this photo. Tell people what really happened. Otherwise the speculation is going to destroy you." Elizabeth didn't respond. She was thinking about something else. About 2 weeks ago, September 28, 1970. The phone call that had come at 2 in the morning. Wait. Let's go back to that night. September 28, 1970. 2:15 in the morning. Elizabeth and Richard Burton were asleep in their Bel Air mansion. They'd gotten home late from a dinner party. Had too much to drink, as usual. Fallen into bed around midnight. The phone on Elizabeth's nightstand rang. Loud and jarring in the darkness. Elizabeth fumbled for it. "Hello." A woman's voice. Professional. Careful. "Miss Taylor? This is Nurse Patricia Morrison calling from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. I'm calling about Montgomery Clift." Elizabeth sat up immediately. Wide awake now. "What happened? Is he okay?" There was a pause. "Miss Taylor, Mr. Clift was admitted to our facility 3 days ago. He's been asking for you. His condition it's very serious. The doctors don't think he has much time." Elizabeth's hand gripped the phone tighter. "How much time?" "Days. maybe less. I'm sorry, Miss Taylor. He's been asking for you constantly. He wants to see you. If you're able to come. I'm coming, Elizabeth said immediately. I'm leaving right now. Tell him I'm coming. Tell him to wait for me. Elizabeth hung up, turned on the bedside lamp, shook Richard awake. I have to go to Washington. Right now. It's Monty. Richard blinked in the sudden light. He knew who Monty was. Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth's closest friend for almost 20 years. The actor. The legend. The broken man. How bad? Richard asked. He's dying, Elizabeth said. She was already out of bed, already pulling clothes from her closet. I have to go now. Richard didn't argue. He got up, started making phone calls, arranging a private plane, calling Elizabeth's assistant, making it happen. By 4 a.m, Elizabeth was in a car heading to the airport. By 6, she was in the air. By 9, she was landing in Maryland. She went straight to the hospital. Didn't stop at a hotel. Didn't change clothes. Just went straight there. Walter Reed was a military hospital. Big. Institutional. Long sterile hallways with fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant everywhere. Nurse Morrison met Elizabeth at the entrance. Took her up to the 3rd floor. To a private room at the end of a long hallway. He's been in and out of consciousness, the nurse said quietly as they walked. When he's awake, he's asking for you. He's very weak. The liver failure it's extensive. His kidneys are shutting down too. We're keeping him comfortable, but there's nothing more we can do medically. Elizabeth nodded. She understood what that meant. Monty was dying. They were just waiting now. The nurse opened the door to Monty's room. I'll give you some privacy. Elizabeth walked in, and almost started crying immediately. Montgomery Clift was lying in the hospital bed. He looked nothing like the beautiful, talented actor Elizabeth had known for 20 years. He looked like he'd aged 40 years in the past 5. His skin was yellow, jaundiced from liver failure. His face was gaunt, skeletal. His eyes were sunken deep in their sockets. His arms were thin as sticks where they lay on top of the white hospital sheets. There were tubes everywhere. 4 lines. A catheter. A heart monitor beeping steadily. An oxygen tube under his nose. He looked like he weighed maybe 90 pounds. Maybe less. But when he saw Elizabeth, his eyes opened wider. And he smiled. A weak, tired smile. But genuine. Bessie, he whispered. That had been his nickname for her for 20 years. Bessie, you came. Of course I came, Elizabeth said. She walked to the bed. Sat down in a chair beside it. Took Monty's hand. It felt fragile. Like bird bones. Did you really think I wouldn't? I'm sorry, Monty whispered. I didn't want you to see me like this. Don't, Elizabeth said. Don't apologize. I love you. I'm here. That's all that matters. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Elizabeth holding Monty's hand. Monty breathing slowly, painfully. The machines beeping steadily. Finally, Monty spoke again. Tell me something good. Something that makes you happy. Elizabeth thought about it. I've been riding horses again. At the ranch. There's this mare, she's temperamental as hell but she's fast. Reminds me of when I was a kid filming National Velvet. Monty smiled slightly. You were so young in that film. 12 years old. I saw it when it came out. Thought you were the most beautiful child I'd ever seen. And then we met 6 years later, Elizabeth said. Filming A Place in the Sun. You were already a huge star. I was terrified of you. I was terrified of you, Monty said. You were 19 and already legendary. Already beautiful. Already Elizabeth Taylor. They'd met in 1951. Elizabeth was 19. Monty was 30. They were filming A Place in the Sun, a drama about class and love and murder. George Stevens directing. High drama. Intense performances. Elizabeth and Monty had chemistry immediately. Not romantic chemistry. They both knew Monty was gay, even if the world didn't. But friend chemistry. Soul chemistry. They understood each other in ways other people didn't. Both of them had been child performers. Both of them had grown up in Hollywood's bizarre, isolated world. Both of them felt like outsiders even as they became more and more famous. Monty was struggling with his sexuality in an era when being openly gay meant career suicide. Elizabeth was struggling with being seen only as a beautiful face when she wanted to be taken seriously as an actress. They found in each other something rare. Real friendship. Real understanding. Real love, even if it wasn't romantic. For the next 20 years, they stayed close. Through everything. Through Elizabeth's marriages. Conrad Hilton. Michael Wilding. Mike Todd. Eddie Fisher. Richard Burton twice. Through Monty's decline. The car accident in 1956 that destroyed his face. The reconstructive surgeries. The addiction to pain medication. The alcoholism. The slow, terrible descent. Elizabeth had tried to help him. God knows she'd tried. She'd gotten him into rehab. Multiple times. She'd paid for treatments. She'd sat with him through withdrawals. She'd held him while he cried and screamed and begged for pills. But Monty couldn't be saved, didn't want to be saved, or maybe was too broken to be saved. Elizabeth never knew which. Now, lying in that hospital bed, Monty was at the end. His body finally giving up after years of abuse. Liver destroyed. Kidneys failing. Heart barely functioning. Elizabeth stayed at the hospital all day, sitting beside Monty's bed, holding his hand, talking to him when he was conscious, just being there when he wasn't. The nurses brought her coffee, sandwiches she didn't eat. They were kind. They understood. This was a vigil. A goodbye. As evening came, Monty's breathing got worse. More labored. The pauses between breaths getting longer. The doctor came in. An older man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Miss Taylor, you should prepare yourself. It won't be much longer now." Elizabeth nodded. She understood. She'd watched Mike Todd's plane crash site. She'd seen death before. She knew what was coming. She climbed into the hospital bed with Monty. Carefully. Gently. Not wanting to disturb the tubes and wires. She lay down beside him, put her arms around him, like she'd done hundreds of times before when he was drunk or high or scared or broken. She whispered in his ear, "I love you. You're not alone. I'm right here. I'm not leaving." Monty's eyes opened slightly. He looked at her, smiled weakly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for being my friend, for not giving up on me, for being here." "Always," Elizabeth said. "Always, Monty. I love you." That's when it happened. That's when someone took the photo. Later, Elizabeth would find out it was a hospital orderly. A young man who worked the evening shift. He'd recognized Elizabeth Taylor going into Monty's room. Had seen her climb into the bed with him. He'd taken out a small camera. One of those new instant Polaroid cameras. He'd stood in the doorway and taken a picture. Flash going off in the dim room. Elizabeth hadn't even noticed. She was focused completely on Monty. The orderly took the photo. Left the hospital. Went straight to a tabloid newspaper office. Sold the photo for $5,000. A fortune in 1970. The tabloids looked at the photo. Saw Elizabeth Taylor in a hospital bed looking exhausted and sick. Saw the 4 tubes. Saw the medical equipment. They assumed Elizabeth was the patient. That she'd been secretly hospitalized. That she was gravely ill. They published it. Front page. Elizabeth Taylor secretly hospitalized. And the story went viral. Before the internet, before social media, it still went viral. Wire services picked it up. Every newspaper in America ran it. Then Europe. Then worldwide. Elizabeth Taylor was dying. Elizabeth Taylor was gravely ill. Elizabeth Taylor's career was over. The studios panicked. Elizabeth was supposed to start filming a new movie in 3 weeks. They'd already spent millions on pre-production. If Elizabeth couldn't work, couldn't finish the film, the insurance wouldn't cover it. They'd lose everything. Directors called Chen Sam demanding answers. Producers threatened lawsuits. Insurance companies wanted medical reports immediately. And Elizabeth had no idea. Because she was sitting in a hospital room in Maryland watching Montgomery Clift die. Monty died on October 1, 1970, at 4:30 in the morning. Elizabeth was holding his hand. She felt it happen. Felt him take one last breath. Felt his hand go slack in hers. He was 45 years old. Elizabeth sat there for a long time, just holding his hand. Not crying. Not moving. Just sitting there. Finally, a nurse came in. Checked for a pulse. Confirmed what Elizabeth already knew. "I'm so sorry, Miss Taylor." Elizabeth nodded. "Can I stay with him a little longer?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." Elizabeth stayed another hour. Then she kissed Monty's forehead, said goodbye, and walked out of the hospital into the early morning darkness. She flew back to Los Angeles that afternoon. Exhausted. Grieving. Still wearing the same clothes she'd left in 3 days earlier. Richard picked her up at the airport. Took her home. She slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke up, Chen Sam was waiting. With the newspaper. With the photograph. With the crisis. Now, sitting in her dressing room at MGM, Elizabeth looked at that photograph. The photograph that was supposed to end her career. "So what do we do?" Chen asked. "How do we handle this?" Do we issue a statement explaining you were visiting a sick friend? Do we get medical reports proving you're healthy? Do we? No, Elizabeth said quietly. Chen blinked. What? No. We're not doing any of that. Elizabeth, your career is on the line. Studios are threatening to cancel projects. Insurance companies are refusing to cover you. Directors are saying you're too risky to work with. We have to do damage control. No, Elizabeth said again. Her voice was firmer now. I'm not explaining anything. I'm not apologizing. I'm not giving anyone medical reports or statements or anything else. Chen stared at her. But why? Elizabeth, this is serious. This could end your career. You need to explain what happened. Tell people you were visiting a friend. That you're not sick. That the photo was misunderstood. Elizabeth turned to look at Chen. Her violet blue eyes were hard, determined. Chen, I was with my best friend when he died. I held him. I made sure he wasn't alone. That's all anyone needs to know. That's all I'm saying. If people want to make assumptions based on a photograph, that's their problem. Not mine. I'm not explaining myself. I'm not apologizing for taking care of someone I loved. But Elizabeth. No, Elizabeth said. I've spent my entire life apologizing, explaining, defending, performing, being what other people wanted me to be. Do you know what Monty said to me before he died? He said thank you. Thank you for not giving up on him. Thank you for being his friend even when everyone else abandoned him. Thank you for being there at the end. Elizabeth's voice was shaking now. Monty spent his entire life hiding. Hiding who he was. Hiding his sexuality. Hiding his pain. Hiding everything because Hollywood wouldn't accept him as he really was. And it killed him. The hiding. The pretending. The shame. It destroyed him long before the alcohol and pills did. I held him while he died and I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not hiding. I'm not apologizing. I'm not living my life for other people's approval. That photograph shows me being a friend. Being human. Being real. And if that ends my career, then fine. Let it end. Because some things matter more than being a movie star. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Elizabeth, you're not thinking clearly. You're grieving. You're not being rational. I'm being perfectly rational, Elizabeth said. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely rational. I know exactly what I'm doing. This could really end your career, Chen said quietly. I know, Elizabeth said. I'm okay with that. Chen left the dressing room. Elizabeth sat there alone, looking at the photograph. The photograph of her in a hospital bed with Monty. The last photograph of them together. She thought it was the most honest photograph ever taken of her. Not the glamorous publicity shots. Not the magazine covers. This. Her, being human. Being a friend. Being real. If that's what ended her career, then so be it. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Within 48 hours, 3 major studios had cancelled projects with Elizabeth. Films she was supposed to star in. Films that had already spent millions in pre-production. Too risky, they said. Insurance won't cover her. Medical liability. Career liability. Too unstable. Directors who'd wanted to work with Elizabeth suddenly went silent. Didn't return calls. Moved on to other actresses. Magazine editors who'd featured Elizabeth monthly stopped calling. The public wants to see glamorous Elizabeth Taylor, one editor told Chen. Not sick Elizabeth Taylor. Not weak Elizabeth Taylor. Not real Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth's asking price dropped. From $1 million per film to $750,000. Then to $500,000. Younger actresses started getting the roles Elizabeth would have been offered. Faye Dunaway. Jane Fonda. Women who looked healthy and strong and reliable. Richard Burton tried to help. He called every studio head he knew. Used every connection he had. Tried to smooth things over. But nobody wanted to listen. The photograph had done too much damage. Elizabeth looked sick, one studio executive told Richard bluntly. Nobody wants to pay millions to watch a sick woman on screen. They want fantasy. Glamour. The Elizabeth Taylor they fell in love with. Not this. Richard told Elizabeth what they were saying. She just nodded. I know. Aren't you angry? Richard asked. They were sitting on the patio of their Bel Air home, drinking gin, watching the sunset. No, Elizabeth said. I'm not angry. I'm tired. I'm tired of performing. Tired of being what everyone else wants me to be. Tired of apologizing for being human. Monty did that his whole life. Performed. Hid. Pretended. And it killed him. I'm not doing that anymore. Richard looked at his wife. He'd been married to her twice now. Knew her better than almost anyone. And he'd never seen her like this. So calm. So resolved. So at peace with potentially losing everything. What if you never work again? Richard asked quietly. Elizabeth shrugged. Then I don't work. There are worse things than not being a movie star, Richard. For 6 months, Elizabeth barely worked. A few small roles here and there. Television movies that didn't require studio approval or insurance. Guest appearances on variety shows. Nothing major. Nothing that would have been worthy of Elizabeth Taylor at the peak of her fame. Her agent panicked. Called her constantly. Elizabeth, you need to do damage control. Issue a statement. Explain the photo. Save your career. No, Elizabeth said every time. But why not? Why throw everything away for one photograph? Elizabeth thought about Monty. About holding him while he died. About his last words thanking her for being there. Because I'm done lying, she finally told her agent. I'm done pretending. I'm done living for other people's expectations. If Hollywood can't handle me being human, being real, being a friend, then I don't want to work in Hollywood anyway. Her agent didn't understand. Nobody did, really. Except maybe Richard, who'd seen Elizabeth at her most vulnerable and loved her anyway. 6 months passed. Then something unexpected happened. A young director named Brian Hutton called Elizabeth directly. He was making a film called X, Y, and Z. An experimental drama about complex relationships. I saw the photograph, Brian said when Elizabeth answered the phone. The hospital photograph. Elizabeth braced herself for the usual pitch. The apology demand. The explanation request. But Brian surprised her. I think that photograph is the most honest thing I've ever seen. You looked real. Human. Vulnerable. Not like a movie star. Like a person. Elizabeth didn't know what to say. That's what I want in my film, Brian continued. Not movie stars. Real people. Real emotions. Real performances. I want you for the lead role. If you're interested. You're not worried about insurance. About me being too risky? Elizabeth asked carefully. Nope, Brian said. I think you're exactly the right amount of risky. I think you're about to give the best performance of your career. Because you've stopped caring what people think. And that's when real art happens. Elizabeth took the role. It was a small film. Low budget. Not a major studio production. But it was work. And it was honest work. A role that required real acting, not just beauty. The film came out in 1972. Critics were surprised. Elizabeth Taylor has never been better, one review said. She's raw. Real. Vulnerable in ways she's never been before on screen. It's like watching a completely different actress. She's not playing a character, another critic wrote. She's playing a human being. And it's revelatory. Audiences were smaller than for her big studio films. But the people who saw it. Really connected with it. This is what Elizabeth Taylor was always capable of, a prominent film critic wrote. When she stopped being a movie star and became an actress. When she stopped performing and started being real. Slowly, things began to shift. Not back to where they were. Elizabeth would never command $1 million per film again. Would never be the biggest star in Hollywood again. But something better happened. She started getting interesting roles. Complex women with flaws and pain and depth. Not just beautiful objects, but real characters. Directors who cared about art more than commerce started calling. Independent filmmakers. People making smaller films with bigger ideas. You know what's funny? Elizabeth told Richard one night in 1973. They were divorced by then but still close. Still friends. That photograph that was supposed to end my career actually saved it. Because now I get to be an actress instead of just a movie star. Do you regret it? Richard asked. Not defending yourself about the photo. Elizabeth thought about it. I regret a lot of things in my life, Richard. I regret marrying the wrong people. I regret drinking too much. I regret not being braver sooner. But being there for Monty when he died, refusing to apologize for it, no. That's not one of my regrets. That's one of the only things I'm actually proud of. Years later, in 1983, Elizabeth was interviewed for a major magazine profile. The interviewer brought up the 1970 photograph. That photo showed the real you, the interviewer said. Not the glamorous movie star. Just a woman taking care of her dying friend. Yes, Elizabeth said simply. It almost destroyed your career. Yes, Elizabeth said again. Do you regret how you handled it? Not explaining. Not defending yourself. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my only regret is that Monty died thinking he had to hide who he was his entire life. That he couldn't live openly as a gay man. That he had to pretend and perform and hide because Hollywood wouldn't accept him. I couldn't save Monty. But maybe I could honor him by refusing to hide anymore, by refusing to apologize for caring about someone, or being human. So no, I don't regret that photo. I regret that we live in a world where being vulnerable, being real, being a friend is seen as weakness instead of strength. The interviewer asked one more question. That photo is pretty famous now. How do you feel when you see it? Elizabeth smiled slightly. It's my favorite photo ever taken of me. Not because I look beautiful, but because I was doing something beautiful. I was there for someone who needed me. And that matters more than any movie I've ever made. The 1970 photograph became a turning point not just in Elizabeth's career, but in her entire approach to life and fame and what really mattered. She'd spent 40 years performing, being Elizabeth Taylor, the icon, the movie star, the legend, the beauty. After that photo, after Monty's death, after refusing to apologize, something shifted. Elizabeth started being Elizabeth the person. Flawed, real, human. And ironically, that's when she became truly great. Not as a movie star, but as an actress. As an activist. As a person. In 1985, when Rock Hudson was dying of AIDS, Elizabeth remembered Monty. Remembered that hospital room. Remembered the choice she'd made. And she made the same choice again. She showed up. She fought. She refused to hide, even when it cost her. Because she'd learned something in that hospital room in 1970, holding Monty while he died. Fame doesn't matter. Career doesn't matter. What people think doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is showing up for the people you love. Being real. Being human. Being there. That photograph, Elizabeth said in one of her last interviews in 2010, taught me the most important lesson of my life. That vulnerability is not weakness. That caring for people is not something to be ashamed of. That being real is more important than being perfect. Monty died believing he had to hide, had to pretend, had to perform, and it destroyed him. I was there at the end. I held him. I made sure he wasn't alone. And when the world tried to punish me for it, I refused to apologize. That's the moment I stopped being Elizabeth Taylor the movie star and became Elizabeth the person. And that's the person I'm proudest of being. Montgomery Clift died alone in so many ways during his life. Hidden, closeted, afraid, ashamed, but not at the very end. At the end, he had Elizabeth, and she made sure he knew he was loved. That's what the photograph captured. Not weakness, but love. The kind of love that shows up even when it costs you everything. The kind of love that refuses to hide. The kind of love that changes you forever.